Morning, folks. Welcome back to the channel. When we would get a new guy at Randolph, one of the first things we did is we take them out on a familiarization orientation ride, and these missions were conducted by Stan and Val. So when this one guy showed up from Laughlin, Greg, I drew the mission, which was fine. So we brief and then we head out, and I'm pointing out landmarks and boundaries and this, that, and the other. And then we head over to Seguin Auxiliary Airfield for some touch and goes. And then from there we head back to Randolph for recovery. Well, as we came up initial, pitched out, the tower called traffic at 4 miles as we approached the perch to begin our final turn. Well, Greg had punched off the gear horn at some point during this, and then he got on the mic button and told the tower that he had the 4-mile traffic in sight, and they said, okay, you're cleared to land. And at that time, Greg put the flaps down, started around the final turn, no gear. Well, crap. I can't let him go too far. So I just said, hey, Greg. He said, yes, sir. I said, it's just a technique, but if you put the gear down, you're going to find your career's going to go a lot further in this endeavor here. Oh, crap. So he throws the gear down, and it was rather somber and quiet. Well, we land, full stop, get out of the airplane, fill out the forms, head into the squadron. I didn't say a thing. Did not say a thing. I figured he was in the cockpit with me. He saw what happens. He knows what happens. And I'll bet he never forgets that the rest of his flying career. As far as I know, he hasn't. And this was my way of paying something forward, I suppose. In the early 70s, I had a check ride at McGuire in C-141s. It was an old Dark 30 takeoff, like a 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that for a local flight. And so we took off. I was getting an annual instrument check, I think. Oh, I know I was. So we take off and we fly down to, or up to Navy Lakehurst. And we're flying approaches in and out of there. They had an ADF approach. So we didn't fly ADF approaches very much. And I didn't care for them that much. But anyway, I'm flying this approach this one morning, and of course it's a simulated single engine out approach. So I've got 3 engines, ADF approach, night, and it's raining and it's windy as hell and it's gusty, and I had my hands full of jet. Anyway, I'm coming down final, and I'm just fighting everything there could be to keep that airplane stable and stay on course. We get down to minimums, and Major Sullivan says, okay, go around. So I went around, but before I went around, I'm thinking, I look over, what's that noise? It was a gear horn. It had been blaring all the way down final, but I was so focused on staying on course, staying on airspeed and so forth, it didn't dawn on me. But anyway, so I did a 3-engine go around. Everything went fine, and we got back, and the only thing he said, well, I had to grade a 3-engine go around. That's all he said about it. And I never forgot that. And I thought, well, here's my opportunity to pay back the experience that Major Sullivan gave me. Well, that was all well and good. And then one day I get called into a meeting at the DO shop. Like I said, I was the chief of Stan and Val. So I show up in this conference room, and Uncle Ted was in there. He was our DO. The 560th Squadron Commander was there, and then there was me, and there was a lawyer sitting in the room. And I'm like, what the hell? Well, what had happened is Greg had been chosen to take this general officer to Florida on a staff assistance visit. And while they're in Florida, the general asked if they could stop in Keesler on the way back. Greg had not planned on stopping at Keesler. He was going to stop at another base for a gas and go, but Greg said, I don't see why not. So he walked over, checked the airfield diagram, saw that it had 8,000 feet, but he neglected to read the IFR sup in its quote entirety. And what the supplement said was that of the 8,000 feet, only 7,000 feet was really usable because of these tall pines at the end of the runway. Okay, fine. So Greg goes in there without a PPR, prior permission required number. We could go in there under certain circumstances, but we had to have command approval. So Greg goes in there and lands, not a problem. Taxi's clear, and as he's taxiing to parking, there's this former ATC Stanival colonel on the ramp, and he sees Greg taxi in, and this guy was really familiar with our operations at Randolph, so he calls back to the DO shop at Randolph, headquarters ATC DO, and asks if this guy had had permission to come in there. Well, no. Well, crap. So he calls down to our DO shop, and Uncle Ted goes ballistic. He calls the squadron commander, calls me. There might have been a couple others in the room, I don't remember. He calls a lawyer. So I walk in there, sit down, I'm listening to these guys and watch them as they're wringing their hands and trying to figure out what to do to Greg to teach him a lesson, you know. And Greg screwed up. He just screwed up. It happens. But anyway, they talked about giving him an Article 15. They talked about a letter of reprimand, talked about grounding him for 2 weeks, and they were going through the whole laundry list. And I'm sitting there just, the guy screwed up. Call him in, chew his ass out a little bit, you know, and put on the appropriate show of that you need to, and send him on his way. I mean, good Lord. Well, anyway, after a conversation, they went around the room, and Uncle Ted says to me, he said, well, Bob, you've been relatively quiet through all this. What are your thoughts? And I was kind of pissed off at that time because these guys were just looking to cover their ass from what the headquarters, they thought the headquarters wanted to see them doing something dramatic to Greg. And I thought, come on, the guy screwed up. You don't need to nail him to a cross for that. So anyway, I said, I don't, from what I've heard, I said, I don't think there's anyone in this room that would disagree with me that Greg is probably the lowest common denominator we have in the squadron. Well, they didn't expect that comment, and they kind of went, yeah, you're kind of right on that. And I said, okay, fine. I said, if Greg can go in there and not smoke the brakes or do any damage to the airplane, we might consider opening it up for normal operations. Well, then they moved on to the next guy to see what he had to say. But anyway, I just couldn't see them smoking Greg. I think he did get a letter of reprimand. But be that as it may, after Randolph, I heard he went to work at UPS. And anyway, think back on it, you know, they said it was not a one mistake Air Force, but in some cases, it sure didn't seem that way. Hope you're doing well, Greg, if you happen to stumble upon this channel. I enjoyed flying with you. Take care.